Welcome everyone to our Deck Tech here at the Magic the Gathering World Championship. I'm Ian Duke. With me here is Owen Turtenwald. Now, Owen, you're playing today here in Modern. Your Modern deck of choice is Infect. For the audience at home, if people aren't super familiar with the deck, could you just give us an overview of how the deck works and why you chose to bring it today?
Sure, my deck is totally centered around small creatures with the ability Infect, which means that if you deal your opponent 10 poison instead of 20 regular damage, you win the game. And a Glistener Elf is 1 green mana for an Infect creature, and instead of being like a 2-power for 1, it's an Infect for 1, so all the pump spells are kind of doing double duty. If I were to become Immense it, that's 12 damage instead of just 6. So.
Sounds fantastic. So let's take a look at the creatures in your deck. First off here, we have, as you said, Glistener Elf. For just 1 green mana, you get a 1/1 Infect. We have Blighted Agent, an unblockable Infect creature. And then usually we don't include the lands here at the very front of the deck tech, but Inkmoth Nexus is so central to the deck's game plan that we've included it here as well. Tell us about this suite of creatures, why you chose exactly these ones, and were there any others that you'd consider for a deck like this?
Yeah, these creatures are all extremely important, because if you don't have one of these in your opening hand, you have to mulligan. You need to have this card in your opening hand, any one of them. And Glistener Elf is extremely fast, but it gets blocked easily. Blighted Agent is not as fast, but can't be blocked. And Inkmoth Nexus is a land, very low cost. And yeah, these are just the centerpiece of the deck. You need to have these going on.
Now, against different types of decks, is there one creature in particular that you're really looking for, or are they just all interchangeable? How does that look? That's
kind of the thing that's great about this deck is Glistener Elf. If your opponent doesn't have very many creatures, it's just the fastest, leanest way to kill your opponent. Like if they're playing like a Valakut deck, or I played against a Through the Breach deck, this guy is really fast. And if you play against something like Affinity or a Tokens deck, or if they have Lingering Souls, like this guy cannot be touched. So he's very important in some of those matchups. And lastly, Inkmoth Nexus is extremely good against like Abrupt Decay, like weird kinds of removal, and just adds a lot of consistency.
So basically we have hyper fast, hard to block, and resilient, kind of as the creatures here, but really you'll take any one that you can get in your opening hand. Okay, excellent. So you said the second aspect of your deck are the pump spells here. Walk us through the pump spells that you've chosen and why you're playing the different numbers of copies of each.
Mutagenic Growth is good because it's just so fast. If you want to ignore everything your opponent's doing, pay no mana to get effectively 4 damage to Infect. And Vines of Vastwood is very resilient because it can protect my creatures by giving them hexproof or be a pump spell. So this is really good against Lightning Bolts, really good at winning fast, really good against Path to Exile. Might of Old Crosha is just extremely efficient, +4 for 1 mana. Kind of like Groundswell, but a little more reliable. It doesn't really care what other cards are in your hand or what else you did that turn. And Become Immense is kind of like the best card in the deck, because it does so much for so little. When you just fill up your graveyard with fetch lands or whatever, you pay 1 mana to give it +6. You almost don't even need another card. If you're giving +6 to an Infect creature and it's connecting, that's very close to just winning the game by itself.
So let's talk about Become Immense for a sec. How quickly can you expect to fill your graveyard with this deck, and how consistently are you casting this for 1 mana, or sometimes you're paying 3 mana? Does that vary from game to game?
At the Pro Tour, I've had turn 2 kills. I've had turn 2, I cast Become Immense, and my opponent is dead. If you just go fetch land, Glistener Elf, fetch land, Mutagenic Growth, Become Immense, game over.
So one of the things you're thinking about just the most in selecting your pump spells here is mana efficiency then?
Yeah. It's a good mix of Mutagenic Growth and Becoming Immense being by far the most efficient. Vines of Vastwood is very versatile, and just to have more of that stuff going on, you have these other ones. Like, I only play 1 Groundswell. It's not as good as the other ones, but sometimes all you need is just a pump spell. Right,
so just kind of going up to the 6th or 17th pump spell as it was, just to round things out. Very cool. So the rest of your deck is kind of filled with sort of protective spells and disruptive spells, that kind of thing. Tell us about the mix that you have here.
So Apostle's Blessing is very good because it aids your cards very well. Like, when you have a Glistener Elf and you can't get through because maybe they have a bunch of Lingering Souls tokens, or they have a Tarmogoyf and a Grimflayer, you can use this to give it protection from green so it can't be blocked anymore. Important to play your pump spells first so you don't get, But it also protects your cards from Path to Exile. Both of these cards are Distortion Strike as well. They're both just very versatile because Distortion Strike can be used to just give +1. Looks like it's really low value, only 1 damage, but when it's Infect and it has Rebound, it's like now you're getting 2 this turn and 2 next turn combined with all you need to Become Immense there.
That's right.
And the thing is, both of these cards, they can make it so that your creatures can't be blocked, and they can make it so that you deal extra damage to win the game. And there's one Spell Pierce here, because I have the rest in the sideboard. I knew I wanted 4, and it's a card that's acceptable to draw against a lot of decks in the format, but you don't really want to draw 2 in the first game, and just kind of getting extra value out of your sideboard.
Now, you had a note on Distortion Strike that sometimes you're getting value over multiple turns. How often would you say the deck kind of explodes and wins the game on one turn versus like chipping away over the course of several turns?
A common play with this card is you just cast it on an irrelevant creature in play, so that when you rebound on the next turn, it actually goes to your graveyard. So you can delve it for the Become Immense. So I've cast this on my opponent's creatures enough times just to get it out of there.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it takes a little forethought, I think, but yeah, that's an excellent play.
Yeah.
So let's see, rounding out the rest of the deck here. We just sort of have some utility, a little bit of extra mana here from Noble Hierarch. Walk us through each of these. They're kind of each specialized cards, right?
I love Gitaxian Probe. This is one of my favorite cards. It's so powerful. It costs nothing, and it puts a card in your graveyard, so you're getting Become Immense to be more reasonable to cast. It allows you to see your opponent's hand, and often you don't know what kind of card they might have. Like maybe they have a Sudden Shock, or they have a Fog, or this. A lot of the fear of playing with small creatures and pump spells is your opponent could just play a removal and 2-for-1 you, but they don't always have it. So do you wait, or there's a lot of uncertainty with how to play the game. There's no more uncertainty with Gitaxian Probe. Also, there's Noble Hierarch. This card is a little peculiar in that it doesn't look like a card you'd want to play. Like if it only said, give you blue and green mana as a 0/1, okay, that's Birds of Paradise. This deck doesn't want a Birds of Paradise.
Right.
And if it only was Exalted, you go like, oh, well, +1 is not a very good pump spell. I don't really care that much. But all of this together, like the power of this card is just so great that it's worth it.
So a question about this. A lot of decks that play Noble Hierarch, that's like the card they're looking for in their opening hand. Is that also the case with this deck, or are you more just like, I need an Infect creature and Noble Hierarch is just kind of free value if I get it?
It's very matchup and draw dependent, but the value of Noble Hierarch varies greatly. Sometimes you want Noble Hierarch really bad, and sometimes you want Glistener Elf, so it's tough. The fact that it can be as good as Glistener Elf is just a testament to the power of the card, because that's another one of the super important cards of the deck. That sometimes you'd rather have this means it's a really important card.
Very cool. And the last two here, Twisted Image and Dismember, a little bit of utility, a little bit of removal. Twisted Image, of course, great at taking out spell skites. Any other applications for this card?
One thing that's amazing about Twisted Image is it's very low opportunity cost. You could just put it in your deck and you could just cycle it for one mana to draw a card. Is really not that bad when you're just trying to throw cards in your graveyard and find Become Immense. It works really well for that. But another thing that's great with Twisted Image is it makes it so my opponent doesn't even want to play a Spellskite. Normally a Spellskite comes down and I'm like, oh no, like all my 17 pump spells are useless. The thing is, this turns Spellskite from a card that somebody wants to have in play against you to a huge liability. If you pay 2 mana for a creature and I kill it and draw a card, you just got blown out. So
very cool. So we're going to round things out with your mana base here. And just real quick, I want to highlight Pendelhaven and Dryad Arbor, 2 utility lands here. Anything notable, especially about these cards?
Pendelhaven's actually kind of cool with Twisted Image. You can pump your guy and then switch it to be 3 power instead of 2. Cool. That comes up. I randomly like Pendelhaven, play a new one, Legend Rules, just to get a card in the graveyard for Become Immense. But the reality is, a land that pumps your creature is already really strong, but when you factor in that your creatures have Infect, this pump is getting like so much more powerful. Like turn 1 Glistener Elf, play Pendelhaven, pump it. Now that's 2 poison. Next turn is 2 more. It's like the turn after that, you just need like 1 card that gives +4/+4.
Definitely.
It's like drawing a card, adding mana. It's protecting your creatures from certain kind of removal spells. Super powerful. That's why we play 2, even though it's legendary.
Absolutely. And then Dryad Arbor, a card that we've seen used to, say, counteract a Liliana of the Veil -2. I was also chatting with you the other day. You said this card has come up a lot against the Death Shadow aggro deck as well.
Yeah, it was kind of a really important part of my playtesting was when I realized that Dryad Arbor was just a really great card in this deck. And the thing is, you can fetch it up with a fetch land. So the first Dryad Arbor you put in your deck is like you have 10 Dryad Arbors now. And the thing it does that's great is against Death Shadow, they pay so much of their own life. This with the Become Immense just kills them. It's not even out of the question that they would put themselves to 7 life on the second turn of the game.
So you actually just switch game plans and just defeat them with damage.
Yeah, you just play a Wooded Foothills, and they put themselves to such a low life total, and they're like, go, what could he have? He doesn't even have a creature. And you're like, fetch, get it, bunch of mutagenic growths, you're dead.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then finishing things out here, we just have the rest of the mana base. Pretty straightforward here, just some fetch lands.
Yep.
No big deal there. It fills up your graveyard for become immense, right?
Yeah. Just 9 green fetch lands. They fuel become immense. They get me breeding pool. They're a little protection against Blood Moon. And I just played a mix because I was afraid of Pithing Needle.
Very cool. So I love the deck. I love the choice of the deck for the tournament. Has it been working out the way you expected to, given the metagame, or how did things match your expectations?
I think the metagame is pretty good for my deck. My record right now is 1-2, but I feel like I've had pretty good matchups and really close, interesting games. So, yeah, I'm a huge fan of this deck. I almost always play it, and
yeah, obviously been a mainstay in Modern for quite some time. Great choice if you go to your local FNM. So that's been Owen Turtenwald with Infect. I'm Ian Duke, signing off from the Deck Tech.